to Introduction to React.js.
Yeah, one second. We'll start with the recording.
Yeah.
It's done. Yeah, I can go.
Okay. So hello everyone. Welcome to the introduction of React.js Day 2 in the DSC webinar series. I am Anurag Sharan, the tech lead at DSC REVA University and a third year student at REVA. Today we'll be continuing on with our discussion of React.js, and today's session will be different from the last session because the last session was more of theory oriented, but today we'll be going into hands-on and I'll explain you the concepts through the hands-on session. So let's start it. Okay, so let's start with what we'll learn today. We'll be learning about React hooks, props, routing, and we'll have a hands-on project, which is a to-do list. Well, not. So every programming tutorial that you see on web development, they make a to-do list. So I wanted to do something different. So today we'll be making a meme generator. So everybody loves memes and it is a fun project to do. So we'll be learning React.js through building a meme generator. So I hope it'll be fun for everybody. And let's start it. So first of all, as I told you, it's a hands-on session. So I have initiated a React project. I told you how to do it in the last session. It's a basic command, which is npx create React app, and then the name of your project. So I have created that here. And last time it took a lot of time to install. So I have installed it before starting the presentation. So you can also do this. It's a simple command. And once it is installed, you will get a message called happy hacking, and then you can start doing it. So I've installed it and I have initiated the project. So it's meme generator folder right here. So I'll just import. I'll open the VS Code in that project for that folder. So for that, you can write in your terminal code and then the folder name. So it's code meme generator, and it will open a new VS Code session in that folder itself. And I'll close the earlier one. Okay. So yeah, so we have our basic structure of a React app that we saw last time. It contains the node modules, which are all the different JavaScript packages and libraries that the Create React app has already installed for you. You don't need to worry about this folder. It's updated and done everything automatically by Create React app. The next folder is our public folder. This contains all of our static files, like the HTML file, the different logos that they have provided with the basic template that they have there. So before going any further, I'll just start this. So to start this server or development server, which Create React app provides, we can just type in npm start and press enter. So all of these commands, which are npm start and all, are defined in the package.json file. So the start command runs this command internally, which is React script start. And similarly, we have some other commands, which we'll see later. And this file contains all of the information about any node package. So our package name is meme generator. This is all done automatically by Create React app. So you don't need to worry about this as well. Okay, so here our development server is starting here. We'll wait for that. And in the meantime, I'll just show you the other things in our folder. We went through this earlier, but this will be just a revision for you. So yeah, so in the index.html, we have all the static HTML part of our web page. Sorry about that. Yeah, here we have the basic HTML tags, the doc type HTML, and we have the meta tags that are required. And we also have our title here somewhere. Yeah, the title is React app for now. I'll change it to meme generator. Okay. Also, inside the body, we have a no script tag. So what this tag does is our whole website will be built upon JavaScript, right? So without JavaScript, our website cannot run. So in case some browser doesn't support JavaScript or somebody has disabled JavaScript in their browser for some reason, then this no script tag will display you need to enable JavaScript to run this app. So this is for those people. In most of the modern web pages, JavaScript is required to run it. So you should enable JavaScript in your browser. Okay. So now comes the most important part of the HTML document, which is this div right here, which is div ID equals root. So all the things that we will write in our application, that will get replaced instead of this tab or inside this tab. Yeah. Now there are some comments which about the template, and then the body is ended and the HTML is ended. This is the simple index.html file that you get with Create React app. Also, there are some logos. These comes with a template, so we won't be needing that. And also a robots.txt. So this file is, if you have learned search engine optimization or other things like that, then you will know about this robots.txt file. This file is just for the web browsers if they want to crawl this website or not. So it does that. It tells them that do we want them to index our page into their search engine or not. That's it. So that was the public folder. It contained all of the static files. Now comes the main folder, which is the source folder. Inside this is the source of our main React application. So yeah, there's the app.js, which is the main JavaScript file for our application. This currently contains all of the template stuff that Create React app provides for us. So if you can see, our development server is up and running, and this is everything that they provide by default. So we'll remove all of this and start from scratch. Yeah, so we can remove everything between the two divs, which is the app and which is a div for the app. So yeah, I've cleaned this. Also, we can remove the logo import because it was the import for the logo which was in the middle. So I've removed that as well. So now we have a clean app.js. Also, similarly, we'll remove the things in app.css that are given by default. So I'll remove everything here. We'll write it from scratch. Okay, so we don't need app.test.js right now because we won't be implementing any testing here. Uh, Also, there are index.js and index.css. So as I told you in the last session, in index.js, what we do is we just render our React application, which is all of the app.js and any sub components from app.js inside the root tag, which is specified in our index.html in the public folder. So we replace the root tag with all of our React application. So that's what we are doing in this index.js. Also, we have the index.css. This contains all of the body level styles that they have applied. So there are some fonts, and we have set the margin as 0 and everything else. Okay, so we don't need this logo.svg. This was imported in app.js, which we removed earlier. And we don't need this report web vitals, and we don't need the setup tests. So yeah, so now we have a completely clean project directory, and we can start from scratch. So for me, building on any application, we can divide our application into components, as I told you earlier. So in React, we go with component-driven approach of building an application. So let's think about some components that we can divide our whole application in. So the basic component that comes into mind is the header, and then the entire rest of the app. So that those are the two different main components that we can divide it into. So let's build a header component for our website, and I'll show you how to build a component. So the best thing about React is that there is no specific folder structure that you have to follow. So there is no convention, there is no specific folder structure. You can do it as you like. So, but I'd like to follow a simple convention. Inside the source folder, I'll create a folder called components, and I'll add all of my different components inside this folder. So I'll create a new folder inside this component named header. There is one convention in React that every component that you make, it should start with a capital letter. So it's not necessary, but everybody follows this. So yeah, it's convention. So inside the folder named header, I'll create a JavaScript file which is required for the header. So I'll name that file index.js, and I'll tell you why we name it index.js. And also inside this folder, along with the index.js, I'll create a new file called header.css. Okay. So we have two files for our component header, which is index.js and header.css. So why do we name this index.js? First of all, we have made this component header, but it is not getting showed anywhere in our website. Okay. We removed the report web vitals, so we need to remove this from our index.js and this here. So now it should work. Right now it is an empty application. Nothing is on there because we have removed everything from app.js. So yeah, we have this header component, but we aren't using it in the app.js. So we'll import the header component here. So if we import header from /, which means inside this folder, there is a components folder. And inside the components folder, there is a header folder. But we aren't specifying the file name, exact file name, which is index.js. This is because in JavaScript, if any folder has an index.js, it is directly taken as the default file for that folder. So the index.js is automatically assumed that inside the header there's an index.js and we are importing from that file. So when we save this, we'll receive an error because we haven't received any error because we don't have anything inside this. So what is it importing? So if I use this here, it doesn't know what it is importing, right? So if I use header here, it doesn't know what it is importing. So for that, I'll just create a component inside this file. So how do you create a component? So one way is you go and importing everything, you create a function component and you export it. But if you need a shortcut for this, we installed an extension in the last session, which is called ES7, to search for it. Yeah, ES7 React Redux GraphQL snippets. So this extension allows you to have different shortcuts, and you can use those shortcuts to create your application. So there are tons of shortcuts here. As you can see in React, you can create a class component using RCC. You can create different types of class components here. Also, you can create some function components. You can read this extension and get to know about all of the different snippets that they have. The snippet that we'll use is RFCE, which is a React functional component. We will be working with functional components in this session because it is what is recommended by the React people. So it's a new addition and they want us to use function components because class components are difficult. I'll explain you why later. Let's name this component as header. As you can see, it replaces both this and this. It comes by default with the snippet. So what we are doing here is we are first importing React from the React library. Also, we are making a functional component called header. A functional component is nothing but a function which returns a JSX tags, a JSX code. So yeah, so we have a header function named header, and it is returning two empty div tags, and we are exporting this header component as default. So in Node.js, we can export functions, variables, and all from a file, and we can import them in another file. This is done to have modularity in your code. So if your code has different components and you're importing it from there, then your code becomes more readable to use. So this is why we are exporting it. And what is export default? So there are two kinds of export. One is named exports, where you can just export this like this without the default, and we'll have to specify the exact name which is here. So right now, while importing this, I can name it anything I want. I can name it header one if it is export default, because it knows that it is only exporting this header by default. So you can name it anything here. But if you are doing a different kind of export, which is without the default, then we'll have to do it like this. And this should be the exact name of the component that you're exporting. So we use this if we want to export multiple variables from a file or multiple functions from a file. So right now we are doing export default because this is the only function that we are exporting for this particular file. Yeah. So I'll save this here and we'll just make a simple header. Let's just name it header for now and let's see if it is working. We have named we have an empty div inside which I have typed header, and we have included that div here. Let's see our application if everything is working fine. Yeah, so we have a header right here, which is our header component. So this is how we can make components and use it inside other components. So here we have the app component inside which we are using the header. So the header component that we made, we are using it just like an HTML tag, as you can see. So this is a self-closing tag inside in HTML. So like any other tag, like you use the a tag for links. So in a similar way, we can use those components like tags. So it's a kind of user-defined tags. You can say it like that. So yeah, we have a header component for us. Now we'll just add some content into the header component. So first of all, for styling this, yeah. So also we also created a header.css file here, right? But we want to use that file inside this. We haven't imported it anywhere. So we'll just import that file here. So we'll do import and /, which means in this folder, we'll select header.css. So we have imported the header.css file inside this index.js. Now I'll just give it a class name. So instead of using classes, class like you use in normal divs, in React and JSX, you need to use class name because class is also a keyword in JavaScript, which is used for creating classes. So you cannot use that keyword here, right? So that's why they have provided an alternative, which is called class name. It works similarly like class, exactly same, just the name is different. So we'll name this class as header. We'll name this div as header, and we'll just save it. Now we want a title. So I'll just create a h1 here. So okay. So if I in normal VS Code, if I type h1, we get the autofill things right. But now we are not getting it because it is recognizing this file as JavaScript. But it is slightly more than JavaScript. We are also using JSX here. So we'll have to select this and change it to JavaScript React. So now it will recognize all of the tags that we have. So if I type h1, it will get the emit abbreviation from it, and I'll type it meme generator here, and I'll save it. So yeah, it says meme generator here. Now I'll just do some changes in this header. So I'll just copy that class name, and this is how you target classes in CSS. You must know. And I'll just give us some padding in this header. As you can see, it is getting stuck inside here. So I'll just give 10 pixels padding. So yeah, 10 pixels is less. So I'll just give a padding left of maybe 50 pixels. And yeah, the header is done. Also, I'll give a slight background to it. So I'll give a background color of, let's search for a nice color, like salmon maybe. Okay, so it's looking not nice. I'll just change the color of the text to white. No, salmon doesn't work for us. We'll look for another color. Uh, Maybe beige. Okay, it's good. And I'll just increase the height for it. Height should be maybe 100 pixels. And also, it's having a bit of a top margin. Let's remove that. Maybe it's from the index.js. Sorry, the index.css. No. Okay, because I'm using an h1 here, I'll just replace this with a div. And make it a class name. Yeah. So the top margin is gone, and I'll just give a font size for this header as uh, 10 pixels maybe. No, it's quite small. Okay, that's good. And now I'll give, instead of padding left, I'll make it a padding of maybe 40, 30 pixels. Okay. And I'll reduce the bottom padding because it is too much. Okay, that's fine. Now we have a header component, as you can see here. Now I'll explain you about. I'll explain you first about props. So yeah. So what is props? So using props, you can make dynamic and reusable components in React by specifying properties or props. So if we have a tag like, for example, if we have a tag like welcome, which displays a welcome message, then if we build if we add a property name in that tag like welcome, but property like Tara, so you know like there are attributes in HTML components, right? So you can specify attributes there, which changes the feature of those HTML tags. So if you have an anchor tag like A, you can give an href attribute which specifies the link that it is pointing to. So in a similar way, we can give properties to these components, and we can, if we have a name property here, then we can customize the welcome message based on the prop value of the name, which is shown in the next example like this. So here we are declaring a functional component here, which is named welcome, and we are returning an h1 which says hello, comma, we have props.name here. So what is this props? Props is the any property that is passed to this function, and inside that property there is an object called name. So how is this property being specified, being transferred to this function? we have this our app component inside which we have imported the welcome component here, and we are specifying a name equals to different names that we want. We have Sarah, we have Kehel, we have Edit, and yeah, so we are specifying different names, and these names are sent to these props as an object to that prop. So for the first case, this welcome component inside the props, we have a props.name called Sarah. So it will return hello Sarah inside this h1. So as you can see, this makes all of these components very reusable. So we have a single component named welcome, but it is being used for different names. So we don't need to write welcome Sarah, welcome Kehal, welcome edit components separately. So this is how we use properties in components. So we'll use the same concept in our header component. So in case if somebody wants, I'm just showing this for to explain properties. So we'll have our props here. So now we are accepting properties here, but we aren't sending any properties right now. So for what we'll use our properties. So for example, let me use these properties to display like the profile name of anybody who is logged in. So I'll do right here. I'll make another class, and I'll just specify here props.name. Any expressions that we write inside the HTML, which is inside the JSX, we specify it inside the curly braces. So if we want to use any variables inside here, which is the like in this case we are using the props variable, we are using these curly braces to specify those variables. So we are using props.name. So right now, as you can see, we aren't sending any properties. So what should it display? So if it doesn't display prop.name, it doesn't have a prop.name, we should have a backup for that, right? So for that, we can use this or operator. So if in case it doesn't have a props.name, it can use something else. So we have a default or operator, and we type name, which is the default name. If we don't specify a property, and we'll just end this div using /div. Okay, so we have a title and a name, and it is looking somewhat like this right now. Meme generator and name here. Okay, so I was changing this font size inside the header, but I'll change it inside the title class so it doesn't apply to everything inside the header. Yeah, so you can see the name is normal and the header is like this, but we want this name to be displayed on the right side of the header, right? So for that, what we'll do is we'll use Flexboxes. So if you know CSS, you will know about Flexboxes, and I'll give a small example of how to use Flexboxes. So we have a header here, and we'll just go to the header.css and change this entire header div into a flexbox. So for that, we'll just have to write display flex. Now it's a flex box. Inside flex boxes, we have to specify the direction of components. So inside the header div, what should be the direction in which the child div should be? Like, so for that, we'll give a flex direction, and we want them to be side by side. So right now we'll write row here. So now, as you can see, the meme generator and name, both of these are side by side. Even now, it's not looking great. So what we'll do is, first of all, we'll just align the items to center. So as you can see now, everything is aligned to the center here. The name and the meme generator is in center. And also, we'll justify the content to to have as much space they want between themselves. So we'll have it as, let's give it space around. So yeah, so our meme generator is right here and then our name is right here. So our title is here and the username is right here. Okay, so that's good. This is how you can use flexboxes. So the align items in the row flexbox will align the items vertically like this, and the justify content will align the items horizontally. So this was a brief introduction to flexboxes if you didn't know about that. So yeah, so right now we are displaying the general name, but we don't want that. We want it to display the name of the user who is logged in. So right now I'll hard code the name of the user who is logged in because we don't have an authentication built right now. Yeah. So this is why I'll just give it a name, and I'll name it as the username is Anurag, and I'll save it. As you can see, the header is displaying Anurag here. If I just change the name here to Sharan, it will change to Sharan here. So this is how you can see we can use reusable components. So inside one component, we have some props that are passed from a parent component. So we can use these props anywhere inside the code. and we can just use these props by using curly braces. Any piece of code that we write inside the HTML or the JSX is written inside the curly braces. And inside the curly braces, we are accessing the name object from the props. Instead of doing this, we can also write it like this. So we have a set of curly braces here, and inside this, I write name. This is called restructuring. So instead of doing props.name here, I can just directly write name here, and it will work in the same way. So yeah, you can actually write props here and use the name object from that, or you can destructure the props object and have the name inside it. Directly access the name inside it. Okay. So now we have a header that we can use. So let's move on to building our main application, which is our meme generator that we want to build. So for that, first of all, we'll make another component for the part below the header. So which will be our actual meme generator component. So let's build that. So inside the components folder, I'll create a new folder. First we created header. Now I'll create a meme generator component folder. And inside this, similarly, like we did in header, we'll create an index.js and one meme generator.css. We'll import the meme generator.css in index.js, and we'll also initialize the component by using rfce and an enter. Here we'll name the component as meme generator, and we'll give the class name as meme. Okay, so we have an empty component here. Let's import that into app.js. So I'll just import meme generator from /components / meme generator. Okay, so we have the meme generator component here. We'll just use it below the header. So we'll just paste that here and close that tag. So as you can see, now there won't be any changes because the meme generator component is empty. Now we'll start building the meme generator component. So before we start building this component, let's just add one h1 so we know that this component is working. Again, it is not showing the suggestions. So we'll have to select React, JavaScript React here. Now it will start showing the suggestions, and we'll do it as meme generator section for now. So we know that this component is imported properly. So yeah, it is saying meme generator section here. So means which means the meme generator component is also imported in the app.js. Now, before making the different things inside this, let's first just have the state here. So what is the state? State is inside React any component which contains any variables or anything that we want to change dynamically. So those values we call it as state. So if we want to inside, for example, in the meme generator, what do we have inside memes? So we have a basic image, and then we have some text. There can be text at the top of the image, and there can be text at the bottom of the image, or we can have both top and bottom of the image. So we need basically in our case we need three things. First is the top text, second is the bottom text, and the third is the basic image upon which we are writing the text. So for that we will need three variables. So if you know JavaScript, you will write the variables like var top text, bottom text, and image. So this is how we declare variables in JavaScript. But in React, we won't use state variables like this. So I gave it was brief introduction to state variables in the last session. Now I'll tell you more about it. In React, we have special state variables which we will use instead of using these default JavaScript variables, and we use that because in React, all of these state variables will be rendered onto the main HTML, right? And if there is any change in that state variable, it should reflect in the HTML dynamically without any refreshes or anything like that. So to make those changes, state variables have special functions that will help you to change the value of that state. And using those functions, we will change the state. Instead of just doing a var and then just equating the top text to something equals to hello, we won't do it like that. We will have state variables and we will change the value of those state variables using those special functions that come with the state variable. And so that brings us to our next slide, which is React hooks. So let's start with React hooks. So before React hooks, to use state variables and anything, thing that we want to be a dynamic component. Inside the dynamic component, we want state variables, right? So before React hooks, we had to create class components which had its own state. We had to initialize those state variables, and we had to use constructors, and then we had to write a render function for that class and return all of it like we're returning it from the functional component. But and we also had functional components back then, but that was in the at that time the function component didn't have any state functionality. So functional components were also called stateless components. So it is also only for displaying UI without any dynamic parts. And the class components were called as stateful components, which has state and dynamic parts to it. So it's a stateful component. But React introduced hooks, which in React 16.8, and they let you use state and other React features without writing a class. So why are we moving away from class? So classes are confusing for both people and machines. So this is exactly what React says. I've taken it from their website. So this is why React recommends us to use functional components. So if I show you a code of a class component and I show you a code of a functional component side by side, you'll see that the functional component is very much easy to read. In class components, you need to have a understanding of how this works in JavaScript. So there's a this keyword that we use in JavaScript, like in some other languages inside classes. So that creates a lot of confusion. Also, there are different things that you need to consider while using a class component. So functional components make it a lot easier, and this is all possible with the help of React hooks. So what are hooks used? Hooks are used to bring the features that were missing in functional components but were there in class components, like state. So hooks let you use more of React's features without writing classes. So we need the aim is to write everything in functions instead of writing classes for it. So that's why we use React hooks. So let's look at our different hooks that we will learn today. So there are two basic hooks that we'll learn. There are some additional hooks as well, but we won't be touching that today. So the two basic hooks that we use is the state hook, which is use state, and the effect hook called use effect. So what do these different hooks do? I'll explain it to you. First of all, the hook that we'll be using right now is state hook, which is use state. So use state is a hook that lets you add React states to functional components. So yeah, I told you that in class components, you have to write a constructor. You need to initialize all of the state variables there. Instead of all that, inside functional components, you have this use state hook or function that is provided by React. And what this function does is it returns a state variable, which is called state here, and also a function to change that state variable, which is right here, which is called set state here. And we can name these two values anything, which according to my preferences, this is not any default value that you have to use this. So instead of state, I can have a count and set count like we used in the last session. If you remember, we had a counter variable and a function to change that counter variable, which was the set count, and we were changing the count based on, using the set count function. So yeah, so this is what useState does. It returns a state, which is a variable, and a set state, which is a function which is used to change that variable. We won't be changing that variable directly by using state equal to some value, but instead of that, we'll be doing set state, and inside the set state function, we will pass the new value as its parameters. Also, if there is a variable called state here, it should have some initial value, right? So it may or may not have. So if you want to have an initial value for that state, you can pass it in the use state while declaring it. So this initial state part of the use state is used to declare an initial value for that state. So this was all about use state. Let's see an example where use state is used. So okay, I'll show you how we use use state in our application. So here, what we need is, as I told you earlier, we need three different kinds of variables. First is the top text, the second is a bottom text, and the third is an image. So first of all, I'll import useState hook. So how you can import it is inside, along with this import React, I'll add a comma and then curly braces. And here I'll write useState. So why am I importing it like this? So if you remember, I told you there are two kinds of exports in Node.js. And we are using Node.js here if you didn't know till now. So create React app and React uses Node.js as the base. So inside here we have a React, we have a React which is a default export. So like in this component we used export default here, which is meme generator. Here we are using in the React library which they have the export default as React. So if you write it without the curly braces, it's the default value that was exported from there. Also, along with the default exports, they have some other exports which are not default. So use state is one of those. So this is how. So you to use exports that are not exported by default, we use these curly braces. So if you didn't understand that, no worries. This is a general statement that we write, so you can just see it and remember this. So this is how we import use state. Also, instead of using this use state separately, we can also use this as React dot use state. You can also use that, but it is uh, quite a mouthful, so we won't be using it like this. We'll be importing use state directly from here, and we will be using that separately. Okay, so we have the use state hook from there. Now let's use it. So first, as you saw in this, you need to have a constant which contains two pairs of values, which is state and set state, and we'll be getting these values from the use state function. So we'll have a constant, and inside this we have the first state that we need is top text, and the function to set it, I'll call it set top text, and we'll be getting all both of these from use state. This is the hook. And initially the text should be empty, right? So I'll just pass an empty string here inside this. So we have our top text. We'll just copy this and change the values here to make a bottom text and set bottom text. And this will also be a empty string. Now we have both of these things. Now we need a random image. So what in this meme generator we will have images, right? So let's add an image called, let's name it random image, and set random image here. And for this, let me just search for an image link quickly, and I'll just add it as the default image there. Okay, so I have this image, quite a popular meme, which is one does not simply. So I'll use that one here. Okay. Now we have our three state variables. So this is how we use state. I think you all have got it by now. So we just have the use state function hook. We call that hook with an initial state that we want, and we save those values as, for the first value is the state variable, and the second value is a function that lets you set that state variable. I'll show you how we are setting it and all later. So yeah, now we have our values for our what we will display here. But also we have just used a random image right now. Yeah. So what if we want different images to be used in our meme generator? So we cannot like use just one single images for memes. Memes have variety. So we need to get different images. But also I don't want to go and scrape the web for different meme templates, and I don't want to increase the source code size of my the size of my source code here by saving all of those images along with these and making them like that. So what I can do is I can use APIs. So what is APIs? So APIs are the acronym for application programming interfaces, and what they do is there are services which allow you to make calls to them. We can make a request that give me some images for memes, and they will return you those images for memes. So this is what API does. We give a request to them, and they return with a response. So if you don't know about APIs, you can go and read more about them. But this is what an API is. So let's use it. So I'll be using an API, but to use that API, first of all, I have to initialize this state and all. When I first load the page, I need to fetch all of those meme images from that API, right? So how do we do that? So we cannot just write it inside this function to fetch those images, right? So to do that, we have the next hook, which is use effect. After the state hook, we have the use effect hooks. So what is use effect? So the effect hook lets you perform side effects in function components. So what are side effects? So side effects are anything that you want as instead of rendering the default JSX, what should be done in the side. So instead of doing along with doing the default rendering, it can do some side effect, which is some function that is called side by side with the render function. So it is primarily used for making API calls, and any function specified under the use effect hook is called after every page reload or every time a component is rendered. So we are rendering our header component and our meme generator component inside our app.js, right? So every time that is rendered, so when it is rendered, whenever we make any changes to that component, or we have reloaded the page, or we are coming to that component from some other page, then we will that component will be re-rendered. Then every time that is done, the use effect hook will take place. The use effect hook is called, and as you can see in this example, we have our simple use state, which is a simple count variable, and along with that, we have imported use effect, and we are using it like this. We have our use effect function here, and inside this, what is this? This is just an arrow function. You have arrow functions in Python and all different languages. Here we are JavaScript also has arrow functions from JavaScript ES6, and we are using that. It is quite simple. It looks very confusing, but it is quite simple. We just have two parentheses, and what's inside those parentheses? Right now we don't have anything, but if we want to specify any parameters to these functions, so this is an example of a normal function, right? So we have the function keyword, we have the name of the function, and we have empty parentheses, and we are writing everything that is inside that here, inside the curly braces. So instead of just writing the name of the function, we won't write the name of the function because these functions do not have any name. Arrow functions don't have any name. It is just doing a small piece of task that we want, and we aren't concerned with its name. So it is only being used inside this use effect. It isn't being used anywhere else. So we won't write its name. We will just specify which parameters it is taking. In this case, it is taking no parameters. We'll have an arrow. So this is just an arrow, which is how we use the arrow functions. So we'll write an equal to and a greater than sign, which is an arrow, and then we will have the empty braces. Inside these braces, we will do the actual function. What the function is doing, we'll write that. So it is just this like this function, but we are eliminating the name of the function and the function keyword. Instead of that, we just have the empty parenthesis and an arrow, and then the curly braces. So it makes writing a function much easier, and this is why we use arrow functions. It is much easier than writing a normal function, and it makes your code looks clean. Instead of that, if I write function and then a function name and everything, it makes your code more cluttered. So arrow function makes it quite simple. Okay, so now moving on to use effect. So inside this use effect function hook, I have this arrow function, and this arrow function, what it is doing, it is setting the title of the document and the document keyword. If you know about DOM, which is document object manipulation, document keyword is actually what contains all of the information about your web page, and it can be used to modify the elements in your web page. So we are setting just the title of this document, which is the title that you can see on the tabs above, and I am changing the title to you clicked count times. So whatever the count is here, it is setting that title to that. So this is done every time the page is reloaded. This is how we use effect. So you will use the same in our uh, meme generator here. So for that, let's just import use effect. And now I'll just write use effect here. And as you can see, our snippets is giving us autofill for that. I can use that. And there is also a return part to a use effect, which is used for cleanup. So this is an advanced concept. So if for some, in some cases, what you are doing is using use effect, you are subscribing to some changes from the API. So what is subscribing to some changes? For example, if you are using an authentication service like Firebase, you are subscribing to the service to check whether the user is logged in or not. So when the user is logged out, you should unsubscribe from that service. So for that, you do this cleanup. So this is basically done to prevent memory leaks. So it is an advanced concept. We won't be covering that today. So basically, that's what this return is done for, used for. So I'll just remove that return here. Also, what is this input? So inside this use effect, the basic usage is like this. So this use effect, but you can also have a dependency to this use effect, which is this. So what is a dependency? So basically, without a dependency, what the use effect will do is every time a component is rendered or reloaded, the page is reloaded, then the use effect will be called once. But if we add a dependency here, like if I have a function which is to fetch the details of any person, and we are specifying a dependency there, like to fetch the details, we need a user ID, maybe. So if I'm sending the user ID and getting the details of that person, what happens if I change that user ID somewhere in the code? So if that happens, then the new details need to be fetched, right? But right now, if without these dependency, it will only fetch that details only once the page is loaded or once the component is loaded. So there it is not doing that. So for that, we can write the user ID as a dependency using these square brackets along with the comma here. And so that is why it is used here. So right now, what we need to do is we need to fetch an API. So which API are we fetching? So I have an API called img flip. They provide uh, endpoint which helps us to get memes. So I'll just go to Chrome and I'll show you. So if I go to this API endpoint, which is api.imgflip.com/get memes, and I press enter, let's see what happens. So yeah, you see a lot of data is present in front of us. So yeah, so what is this? So this is called JSON. So JSON stands for a JavaScript object notation, and what it does is it is the language of the web. You can tell it like that. So any API calls that are done, the requests, the responses, everything is done in the format of JSON. So this is just a JavaScript object which start with a curly brace. It has keys and values. So the success is a key and true is a value. So all of this, and you can embed like you can have more nested objects inside this. You can have arrays, anything that is supported in JavaScript you can have in JSON. And all of this is just a this is just a long string which contains all of our data that we need. So what is this API of img flip doing? It is just sending us lots of meme templates. So we need these. So for example, we have this meme template. So this inside this memes object, we have the key as memes, and the value is an array. And what is this array containing? It is containing all of the different memes. So the first element of this array is an object. I'll have to just zoom in to show you. Okay. So the first element of this array is an object, and this object has an ID. So this is the ID of the meme, which is this random number. And then it has a name. So the first name is Drake Hotline Bling. So it's quite a popular meme, right? So it contains this image. And if I open that image here, okay, this files may have been deleted, so it is not showing it. So let's see if this works. Okay, so we have these different memes right here, right? Now I'll just so now what we were doing is we were opening these memes inside the browser. So what we are basically doing is there are different types of requests in APIs. So let me give you a brief overview about APIs right now. If you don't know about APIs, I'll show you. So let's see. I take any other meme here. So this one maybe, and I'll just paste it here. And yeah, so this is the Jesus meme. So it is the one does not simply mean. So yeah, this is how you are getting different images from the API. So what are APIs? I told you it is a service in which we give the request and we get some responses from that. So what request did we give right now? We just type the URL in our browser, right? So whenever we are typing any URL in our browser and pressing enter, what we are doing, what the browser is doing behind the scenes is it is sending a GET request. So it is sending a GET request to the API, and it is sending some responses back, which is our basic HTML page. So right now we have sent a GET request to this API, and it has sent a JSON file in the response. So that's why we don't have a formatted web page. You're just having these abstract values right now. So yeah, there are different kinds of requests. There are get request, post request, put request, and different kind of things. We won't be covering that today. That was just an introduction to APIs. So this is basically a get request. So how do we make? Right now we were making this request from the browser. So how do we make that in React? So we will use the use effect. So whenever the page is loaded first, we will load all of the memes from the API, and then we'll use those memes to create our own memes, right? So we'll use this use effect to call all of those memes. And to fetch APIs, we have a keyword called fetch. This is a function which is used to fetch from APIs, fetch data from this API. Inside this fetch, I'll provide a string which contains the URL from which you have to fetch the details. So I'll just copy that URL that we had earlier, which is the ing flip one. And I'll paste it right here. Okay, so we have the fetch. And now that we have fetched it, what do we do next? Now we want the response from that fetch. So for that, we will be using this then keyword. So if you know JavaScript, you know what then is. So this is a replacement for the async functions. So whenever we are fetching this, this is calling that API in the backend, and then it takes some time for that API to get called. So if I write the next line just beside this, what it will do is the API will be called in the background, and then the next line will continue executing. So that we don't want that to happen. We want to get the results from it, and only after that we want the next line to happen. For that, we have this then keyword, and then after we get the response from this, we have the response here, and we are creating another arrow function here. So this arrow function has a props of response. So we don't necessarily need to have this parenthesis when we have a single property. So we can write it without the parenthesis. So it makes it much smaller. And we don't need to have a curly braces when we just have one single statement. So what it is doing is it is returning the response and converting it into JSON. So what this response we are getting is the string. So we want that string to be converted into our object. So this is why we are doing response.json here. Also, the response that we get, it will have different keys and values, right? So this JSON will have a different keys and values, but we just want the data part from that. So what we'll have is we'll have another then. So when this is converted into a JSON, then we'll have another then, and this will contain the response. So this response isn't coming from this fetch, which is coming from this response.json, and this is effectively response.json. This is the object, and from this object, I'll save the all of the responses as set memes. I'll just have a state variable called memes. Just like how I created it earlier. And inside this, I'm doing set memes, which is this one, and I'm setting these memes with the data which I get from that response. So I'll do it response.data. So now you have seen how we are using use effect. This is just doing a fetch call to this API, which is a get request, and then we are saving that response as in our set memes, which is our memes state variable. We are setting those memes as the response.data, which is the data we got from that response. Now, now we have got the all of the memes, right? Let's just check if the memes have been updated in our if we are getting these memes or not. So along with these set memes, what I'll do is right now I have to give the curly braces because I want to add one more line here. I'll just do a log, which is a console.log of response.data. Let's see if we are getting the responses. So what console.log does is it is printing all of that in our console, which is we can see from the inspect part. Here, if you go to console, and I'll just refresh this once. So here you are seeing there are some warnings. We'll ignore those warnings by doing this. And yeah, So here you can see there is an object called memes, and it contains an array of 100 different memes, as you can see here. So these are the different memes that we can use in our project. Okay, so let's continue. So now we know that we are getting the memes and the responses from the API call. So we don't need the console.log. And let's just continue. Now we have all the memes. What we need to do now? We need to get the input from the user to tell like whatever text they want on the memes, right? So we to do that, we'll create some input field. So the first input fields would be for the top text. So if you write input, it will automatically give all of these, and I'll just name it as top text. I'll have a placeholder called top text, and also we'll have a value. Not here. Here. And what this value is. So we want these this in the any changes that we have in this input, we want that to be reflected here on our top text state variable. So how do we do that? So first of all, we'll be setting the value not by this string. Instead of that, we'll set this value dynamically by using our curly braces, and we'll write top text. So right now, the value of this is just an empty string because top text contains an empty string. How do we change this value? For that, we have the onChange function here. And what should we do on changing this function? We should set the value of top text. So what onChange does is, sorry. Yeah. So what onChange does is, whenever any input is being done on the any change in the value of the text box is done, this onChange function get called. And what we are doing here is we are creating an arrow function which doesn't have any parameters here. But what this function is doing, this function is just setting the top text to. Also, no, we need a parameter which is e. What is e? E is the event object. So in HTML, whenever we have any, let's save this first. Okay, in HTML, whenever we do some changes or whenever any event is occurred, it returns an event object. So this event object contains all of the details about that event. And what do we want from that event object? We want to know what has been changed in the text box. So we want the value of the event, of the target of that event, which is the text box. So we'll write e.target.value. So this will extract the value which has been changed in the text box. So we have set the top text state variable with the value which has been changed in the text box. Let's see if it works. So we have the top text box, and anything we'll write, it should be reflected there. So if I'm writing hello, so yeah, it is being reflected there. And what happens if I just change the top text value, and we'll just do it as an empty string. So now whatever I'm doing, any text that I write, it won't display there because we are changing the value, but we aren't displaying it. This is why we need to have the top text here as in the curly braces. So now if we write anything, it gets displayed. So yeah, we have an input for our top text. Let's have a similar input for our bottom text of the meme. So I'll just copy that, and wherever there is top text, I'll change it with bottom text. I'll save that. So here we have the two inputs for top text and bottom text. Also, we need a function, we need a button so that we can generate the meme. So we will have a button here. We will set generate, we will say generate. And whenever this button is clicked, we need to trigger a form. So whenever this button is clicked, we need to trigger a function, right? So let's just make a function that will display the images. First of all, what I'll do is I'll just show you how the meme is looking right now. So I'll just below this, I'll create another div called meme, meme display. Okay, and inside this meme display, we'll first have an image, and the source will be the random image that I made earlier. So the random image, and we can have any alt like meme here. So alt is just an alternative. So if for some reason the browser cannot display that meme, it will say meme. It is also used for SEO purposes. Below this, I'll have two H2 tags. The first tag, I'll just add a class name here to top, and below that, I'll have another H2 with the class name as bottom. And inside this H2, I need to have those two state variables displayed, which we created earlier for the top and bottom text. So this will have the top text state variable, and this will have the bottom text state variable. Okay, so we have those things. And if I look at the site, you can see if I top any top text here and the bottom text here, it gets displayed below the actual meme. So we need it to be displayed on the meme. So for that, we will use CSS. So first of all, I'll just make this, keep this, no, we'll write it here only. And let's go into the CSS and we'll change some things in the CSS. Okay. So for the CSS, we have the memes generator.css. Here, first we need to these form elements, we need to make it, we need to add some spacing between it. So I'll just select input here and we'll add a margin right to these inputs, or 50 pixels maybe. That would be too much. Okay, it's good. And also we'll add a margin bottom to these as 50 pixels. Okay, so we have it like this right here. Also, let's make the entire component Flexbox so that we can center align all of these easily. So we'll target the main class here, which is the main class here, and we'll make it display flex. The flex direction in this case will be column because everything needs to be displayed one on top of the other instead of side by side. It will be column, and let's see what happens right now. So it's same. But now the property of Flexbox is, so if we don't specify the width for these elements, it will take the maximum width that is possible here. So to fix that, I'll just make it align items to the center, so it doesn't take all of the space that is given to it. So now, as you can see, it looks quite better. It's all center aligned, and we don't need this H1 here, so I'll remove that. Okay, so we have a top text and a bottom text. We have a generate button. We have center aligned all of those. And let's make this somewhat better here, this form. So I'll create a div called form, and I'll place all of the form elements inside that. Okay, this form is not a Flexbox, so I'll make it that. So we have the form elements, and for now I won't add this margin bottom here to these inputs, and neither the margin right. We'll do those things inside this Flexbox. I'll just add the margin bottom instead of the. We'll add some padding to this Flexbox. So yeah, this looks much better. So yeah, now we have to. So we have some text here for the meme. So we need to center this text right to center this text above the this meme. So I'll just have a meme that I saw. One does not simply mutate state. I'll just align these above the image. So for that, I'll just select those. So first I'll add a class to the image. And we'll take the top. We'll give it a Z index of 9. Z index is used to tell which component should be on top of which other component. So if something has a Z index higher than other component, it will display on top of that. So right now it isn't displaying on top of that because it is a part of the Flexbox, so it is coming below that. I'll just do it as absolute positioning, so it will come on top of that. So both of this will have a position of absolute. And so by doing that, as you can see, it is going on top of this other element. So let's give it a top of 10. Okay, so it is getting the absolute position in respect to this. So what I'll do is I'll create this meme display. And I'll make it position relative. So it should display on top of the meme display, right? Let's make both of this absolute first, then I'll just sort out what's happening here. Both of the text is absolute, and we will have to show it above everything. So we will keep this meme display separate from the normal Flexbox, and let's see if that works. And if you want to have two different divs here, we can't do it like this. React will throw an error. So as you can see, there's an error here that it says that adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So you cannot have two different tags side by side and render that. We need to have a parent tag, single parent tag. For that, we can use fragments. So this is how what a React fragment is. It is just an empty tag. It doesn't serve any purpose except from making a single parent of different child elements. We can use fragments when we have two different elements that we want to display. So yeah, so right now we have made the meme display separate, and I'll see if I can position these elements right now. No, just a second. So if you want any help with CSS, you can always go to the website, which is W3 Schools. So it has all of the information of CSS. So anytime you forget anything, you can just refer that. So I'm just referring that to see how we can align it above the image. Okay, so I'll have to also make the image as a absolute position. So I didn't do that, which is why it was not displaying on top of the image. So I'll make it as absolute. Yeah, so now it is displaying on top of the image. That was the problem. I'll just put it back inside of that Flexbox. So it will be centered aligned again. Okay. So now what we'll do is this is getting because we have absolute positioned this, so it is starting from the center. It is not treating the center of the image as the center. So I'll give it a negative margin to sort it out right now. Margin left, I'll give it a negative 50 pixels. So yeah, so let's do it negative 25 VW. VW is the position relative to the width of the page. So it is used in the responsive web design. So if you want your page to change according to the screen it is being displayed on, so that's when you use VW. So yeah, now it is in the center again, and now I'll just add all of this and position it correctly. So the bottom one, so the both of the text should firstly have white color. So I'll just use the white color here. And now both of these I'll position them. So the first one, first of all, it is getting wrapped. So we need to add a width to it, so it doesn't wrap. So I'll add the width as 50 pixels. Let's see if that works. Let's increase that. Yeah. So I'll just give it 500 pixels so it doesn't wrap. Okay. Same. I'll do it in the bottom one. Okay. Now I'll just give the bottom a positioning from the bottom of the element. So I'll give it a bottom as 10. Let's see what happens. Uh, okay. I'll just add a top thing. So the first one is positioned from top as 1. I'll position the second one from the top as 50. Okay, I can save this. Okay, this main display doesn't have any height. That's why it is getting. So let's give it a height of 50 VW. That should work. Okay, I had to add pixels here. So yeah, now we have our meme. We have generated a meme, and this is how we do everything in React. So now what did we learn with this? We learned how to use effect to fetch the memes. We learned how to use state, which is for assigning any creating a state variable which can be set using a function, and this use state returns a state variable and a function to change that state. We learned use effect, which is called whenever the page is reloaded every time. And we created a meme generator. We can just change the values here and it will be reflected on that meme. Okay, so now we have all of this here, right? But here we aren't using the images that are sent from the function. So we were just doing the images which we had using the default image that we had. Uh, let's use the images that are being returned from the API. So for that, what we'll do is we will create any one more use effect here. And inside this use effect, we will use the dependency. So we weren't using the dependency before. Right now we will use a dependency. Or what is the dependency here? Because we need to have the memes, right? When anytime the meme has changed, the memes array has changed, we need to uh, set a new random meme image. So for that, I have added the memes dependency here. So we'll use that. And now I'll just set the random image, which is this. So I'll just use. So first I'll check if the memes is there or not. So if the memes is not there, there's no point setting the random image. So if the memes are there, which means the memes variable is not null, or I can just say memes are there. Okay, so if the memes are there, then we'll set the set random image. So we need to have a select a random image from all of the set of memes, right? So we have all of those memes which are stored in this meme state. So we'll just first use the meme state, and from this I need to have, first of all, let's just create a random number. So that number we will set. So let's create a constant of random number. And for this, I'll use the JavaScript extension that is used to get a random number. So we'll just use math.flow. And inside this, we are using math.random, which is multiplied by the length of the all of those images that we've got. So the random number shouldn't exceed the length of the images that we have, right? The number of images that we have. So we'll just use memes dot length. Dot length is used to get the size of any array. So yeah, so this is how we are getting the random number. And now we are sending the random image with the memes of that random number that we have. So we are getting a random index here, and we are using that random index to get that particular meme here. And we just don't want all of the object. So here, okay, it's gone. So as you saw earlier, it contained a lot of details about that image, right? So we just are concerned with the URL of that image. So I'll just type dot URL. That we'll get from there, and I'll just save this, and let's see what happens if this works or not. Okay, it cannot read the property URL upon defined. This happened because the memes are not really there. So that's why I'll add the question mark here. So if I add the question mark, this specifies that if this doesn't exist, then don't throw an error. So that's why I added. So yeah, this, I think the API is down or is an older API. So that's why I'm not able to fetch the particular image. So you saw we have that image link, but we aren't fetching that because there is some permissions error that it is giving. So this is why the images aren't getting set from the API. So these images, I cannot access it from there. So if I paste this, it is giving an access denied. So maybe I need to have an API key, which I don't have. But you know, you came to know about the concept of how we are setting all the memes from the API. So instead of that, I'll just use the default image that we have here. I won't be using this use effect right now. Maybe that API is an older one. That's why it is not happening. So you just know the concept. So you know how use effect works. You know we are calling the API. You saw the response that we are getting from the API. So let's show it once again. So once the memes has been set, let's show the response as well in the log. So if I see the responses here in the console, so let's refresh it now. Okay, I'm console logging the memes. I have to console log the response data. One more thing. Right now, I console log the memes here, right? But it was showing me an empty array. But we are setting the memes here. Then why is it showing an empty array? Just because of the thing that I explained earlier, which is asynchronous calls. So the setting of any state object is done in an asynchronous way. So anything that is done, any statement that is written after that, so the set memes operation is going on, but the next operation is continued. So by the time the console log happened, the memes weren't actually set. It was in the process of setting the memes. That's why we didn't get the response there. So instead of that, I'm just using the response.data, which we are saving in the set meme. And now we'll see the response, which is an array of 100 memes. So these were the memes, but we cannot use the URL for some reason. So yeah, that was our basic meme generator that we have. So you can just type anyone does not simply make memes. So any meme that you want. So this was a simple project that you can do to learn React, and this is why I use this. Many people were making to-do list and anything that any HTML or CSS that we learn. Most of the tutorials show you how to create a to-do list. So I wanted to do something new, so we had a meme generator. So it was a fun project. So there is one last concept that I want to teach you, and I'll just run you through it, which is routing. So what is routing? Uh, Whenever you go to a website, you can click different links and you can go to one from one part of that website to another. But in React, and that happens like when you click a link, it again does an call to the API from the server, and the server sends you the next page, right? So the next page response it sends you, and that is rendered in your browser. But React works differently. In React, we have the concept of a single page application. So I mentioned this in the last session too. So in a single page application, you get all of the application. When you first go to the URL, all of the application is downloaded to your browser, and then your browser just changes the page with the content that you want. So in that case, how do you do the routing? So if you go to a different link, your browser should know that in this link, we need to display this page. So for that, we use this routing concept. So for routing, we use the React router library. It is the standard routing library for React, and everybody uses that. And every time we click a link to another page in the website, it doesn't get fetched from the server. Instead, the contents of the web page are replaced by the contents of the new page using JavaScript. So you know the root tag, right? So inside the root tag, every content that is there, the React router, what it does is it replaces all of those content with the content of the new page. Instead of reloading the website every time, it's getting changed right there itself. So you don't need to have reloads. So page reloads are slower, right? So instead of page reloads, you are just doing everything inside that. So we are redirecting without reloading. So this is the foundation of a single page application. So if you know about YouTube, earlier when you clicked on any video, it reloaded the page and it took some time to reload and then the video was displayed. But nowadays, what happens? Whenever you click on a particular video, what it does is it shows a loading bar of a red color on top of your page, and it looks really good, and it doesn't reload. It does take some time because of your internet speed, but it shows an animation on top of the page that the page is loading, and then it displays it without reloading the whole page. So earlier YouTube was not a single page application, but now they have converted into a single page application, and many websites are moving on to the concept of single page applications. Yeah. So how React router works is you have a route component, and all of this is inside a switch. I'll tell you what a switch is, but let's look at a route. So inside this route component, we have a path attribute, which we are specifying the path that we want to target. So if our site name is example.com, so it should if we go to example.com/about, what should it do? We are giving it inside this route component, and we are saying that render the about component when this about route is being fetched. In a similar way, we are doing the same thing for users. And at the end, if we want to set what should be displayed in the home page, so without anything after a slash, so we are setting it right here as home. And what this switch is doing, this switch is used to just select one out of these three things. So this is what a switch is doing. And if you want to implement routing in your application, I'll just go to the React router page and I'll explain it from there. There are different components in React router. Also, as I told you, React has both React Native and the React DOM, which is for the web. Similarly, React router also have its own library for the native and for the web. So for now, we are concerned with the web, so we'll go in the web. Here, it is giving you a quick start. So this is how we created our React project here, right? Also, to use this React router, you will need to install that. So you need to have this npm install React router DOM. So we'll do that for our project too. I'll just close this. I'll just end the execution by pressing Control+C and then typing Y. And I'll just install this React router DOM. It will take some time. Till then, I am explaining it here. So we'll take a look at this first example, and I use this example in my presentation. So what we're doing is we are importing React Router DOM has many different components. So we're importing some of those components. First is the browser router. So this browser router is the wrapper inside which all of other components of the React router works. So if you want to use link or route or switch, it needs to be placed inside the browser router tag. This is how React router works. So we are importing the browser router as router. So we are doing this because it looks simpler. So if you want, you can just import browser router and you can type that here. But they are importing it as the name router, and that is the name they are using here. So you can do this for any other component if you want. You can name switch as any other value if you want. So yeah, it's installing in the background. So let's look at it. First, they're using browser router, which is the wrapper for all of the routing. Then we have the switch that we saw earlier. Then we have the route that we saw earlier, and we have link. So the link, the basic links that we used in HTML was an anchor tag, which is a. But in React router, what we are doing is we are, instead of using an anchor tag, we are using a link tag, and that inside the link tag, instead of an href, we are passing a to value, and inside the to value, we are giving the path to which you want to go. So if you want to go to about, the to will be /about, and you can see here we aren't mentioning the exact all of the URL. We're just mentioning the relative URL that we want to go to. So even if you host this whole application to a different URL, like if you hosted it at example.com earlier, and now you want to host it to example2.com, you don't need to go ahead in your website and change each and every link. All of that is handled automatically by this link component. So that's it. That is how we use link. There are some other components, but we will only be covering that now. We can learn more about it from its documentation. Okay. So now let's see what it is doing here in this part. I showed you from the switch, but I'll show you what is this part here. So what it is doing is it is creating a nav component, which is in HTML5 tag, for creating a navigation part of your website, which is used to navigate to different places. So inside this navigation, we have an unordered list of different list items, which contain different links to the different pages in your website. So the first link goes to home, the second link goes to about, the third link goes to users. So they have used a link component. So you don't have to just write everything in the switch, and instead of that, along with the switch, you can have normal components. So this component won't be changed. So this is the default thing which will be displayed above all of those different components that are inside the switch, which are about, users, home. So if you have a header tag which is common across your pages, you can have that header tag here instead of this navigation that they have shown. So yeah, that was the part before the switch. Now after the switch, I've explained it earlier. So we have different routes for different paths, which is for the about, the users, and the home. And instead of keeping these components in a separate file for explanation purposes, they have made the home, about, and the users component below that. You can do this as well, but I recommend you to make it in different files so that it is easier to maintain your code and it looks better also. So yeah, this is how we use React Router. It is still loading in mine. So I'll just go on and see if there is anything else that I can explain. Okay, let's wait for it to install. Till then, we can just implement our routing here without anything. So first, we have a meme generator part here. But what if we want an about page as well to let users know about your page? We'll have an about page. For that, let's create an about component. And inside this about component, we'll have the regular index.js, and along with that, about.css. And I'll import that index.js. Sorry, the about.css. And I'll do RFCE, which is for creating a functional component. And here I'll make the component name as about. And inside this, I'll just have a simple h1 name. And inside this h1, let me make it a React page. And here I'll say you about meme generator. Welcome to meme generator. Was a fun project that we made to learn the basics of React. Okay, so this is the about page that we have here. It is still installing, so we'll wait for that. And let's implement the routing here. It won't be visible on the page, but let's do it anyways instead of wasting time. So we have to import the different components from the React router here. So the different components that we need are, first we need the switch and the router and the route. We don't need the link for now. Okay, we need the link, so we'll have the link as well. But we are displaying the links in the header, so we won't import the link in the app.js. I'll show you how. So we are just importing the browser router as router, switch, and the route. DOM, React router DOM. So this is the name of the package, React router DOM. This is the DOM version, which is the web version of React router. There is another package for the React native. And here, instead of just showing the meme generator here, we'll just have a router. So we'll just use the router in the above head because we need to use link in the head. And as I told you earlier, to use any React router component, we need to wrap it with the router object here, with the router component here that they have. So I'll use it above header as well because we need to use the links in the header. And we have closed the router component here. And now we need to have the switch component. So the header will be common across all of the pages. So I'm keeping the header outside of the switch. And now I'm wrapping the meme generator inside of the switch. Also, now we will have the different route components. The route and then 2 should be, sorry, instead of 2 we have path in route. So 2 is for links. So the path would be for the first one we have the slash path, which is the home page. So the home page should be the meme generator itself. So I'll keep it as meme generator. And I'll close the route cell. And before that, we need to have an about page. So we'll create another route and give it the path as slash about. Close the route tag. We haven't imported the about component yet, so I'll import that. So we have the about page here. So now we have the basic structure of React routing. Let's make it a lot clearer. Inside the switch, we have the different routes that we want to go to. So yeah. Also, we need to add the links in the header. So some link to go to the about page. So we'll move on to the header page. While it is still installing, it is taking a lot of time to index. Don't know why. Here I'll import the link component, not in capital. And I'll add another div here beside profile for about. And I'll add the link to the about page here. So I'll have the link. The link tag. Yeah. And in between these tags, we will just write about, which is the text that will be displayed. And in the 2, we will have about route here. So it is making a link to the about route from here. So let's wait for some more time. It is just installing it. So we have all of our website ready. So we have implemented the routing. We have implemented the main concept, which is our meme generator. And we have an about page on which we will use the routing. So yeah, it is almost done. This export default shouldn't be displayed like this. I think there is an error somewhere. Okay, we haven't closed the switch tag. Yeah, now it is color coded correctly. Now our package is installed. We are using npm the npm start command to start our development server again. and we should be able to see our final product here. Let's wait for it to start again. So every time you install a new package, the npm start takes some time. But otherwise, whenever you save, it has a hot reload feature. So if you do any changes and save it, it will automatically reload it quickly in your website. So let's recap all of the features that we learned about React today. So the first thing we learned is the React hooks. So we learned two of those hooks, which are useState and useEffect. UseState is used for creating a state variable, which can be changed, and useEffect is used to execute a function whenever a page is reloaded or a component is reloaded. Then we learned about props. So props are used to pass values to components so that we can make components reusable. So we used a header component with a prop for name, and whatever name we supply, it is available here. So this is how we used props here. Then we learned about the routing. So in routing, we can create different pages and we can route our users to those, but we aren't making different server requests for that. It is just happening on the client side. So even if the client's net is off, once you have loaded it, it can route to different pages. But to make a fully an application that works offline web application, you need to make a progressive web app. React simply cannot do it alone. So a progressive web app is another thing that you can learn to make applications that work offline. So these were the different things. We had a hands-on project, which was not a to-do list. We made a meme generator. Let's see if it has completed. It's starting the development server. Great. In the meantime, if you have any doubts, you can ask me. If the mics are disabled, can you please enable it? Or you can use the text box to add any doubts that you have. Yes, I can see the mics are enabled now. So if you have any doubts, you can speak up, or you can just use the text box. It's taking some time to start the server. Okay, so there was an error here. So near this expected corresponding closing tag for link. Okay, so I closed it incorrectly here in the header. So instead of closing it like this, I had to close it like this. Yeah. Now our page should be visible. Let's reload this. Yeah, so we have our basic page here. We also have a link for the about page. When I click that link, we go on to the about page. But now we don't have any option to go to the main page. So like I'll just add that link to the meme generator text here. That we can go to the main page as well. I'm adding the link to just the slash, which is the home page. Using that link tag. Now we have a link to go to the home page as well, as we can go to the about page. So this is how routing is enabled in React. So you can use learn more about the React router library to add more complex features like if you want to supply some queries here. So if you know in some sites you have a query like name equal to something like here. So you can add those queries as well, and you can handle that in React router by itself. So you don't have to use any other libraries for getting these queries. So React Router has many different things that you can learn about. So you can just refer to the documentation for that. We today made just a simple project, and I made this project to cover all of the different concepts like use state, use effect, React Router, and as well as props, which are these. So thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned something from it. So anything any other doubt that you have or when you are doing, so yeah, we have a doubt. So do we have to do npm install router every time when we make a new app? Yes, because whenever we are making a new app, we are starting from an empty project. Inside that project, there is just the default library of React. It doesn't contain any other library which are third party. So React router is a third party, right? It is not made by the makers of React. So any third-party libraries that you have, you need to install it after creating a new project. So, but once you have installed that, you can just use it by doing npm start. No need to install it again and again. So yeah, that was it. If you have any questions or any other questions, you can just send me a message on Teams or WhatsApp, and I'm available both of the anywhere. And also, uh, if we I get any other topics that I want to discuss, I'll take another session. But right now, these were the basic topics of React that I wanted to cover, and I covered it in these two sessions. If you haven't watched the first session, you can go and watch that one again. And this was the second session and the finale to Introduction to React. Thank you for everyone who stayed along these two sessions. And I had fun making them. And hopefully, you learned something new and you can implement that by yourself in new projects. Thank you.